It's no longer Detroit versus everybody. It's Detroit with everybody because everybody is behind this Lions team, and it's because of Dan Campbell.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon. NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman. Really excited about the episode we have for y'all today. We're going to have a far-ranging and detailed conversation about one of the most interesting races in the NFL this season. That would be the race for NFL Coach of the Year. So many incredible performances, so many coaches worthy of consideration. Literally not enough time in the show to include them all. We found that out when we recorded it. Myself and Carmen Vitali, our friend from foxsports.com, getting into the nitty-gritty of so many different coaches that deserve mention for the amazing jobs that they're doing. Really enjoyed that conversation. We'll talk about Monday Night Football a little bit later in the show. Bengals beat the Cowboys in a wacky one that probably doesn't affect the playoff race too much, but was one moment worth mentioning at the end. We've got our power rankings, as we always do. But first, as usual, we stopped by to chat with our friend NFL on Fox insider Jay Glazer. Had some really fun stuff to talk about with Jay, from the Rams' incredible performance, Sean McVay's role in the turnaround against the Buffalo Bills, Aaron Rodgers, all the things he's dealing with in New York this season, as well as a few other tidbits that I found very interesting. A really fun conversation with Jay Glazer to lead the show off. Check it out.
Well, Jay, let's start with an instant classic on Sunday afternoon. And it's funny because I remember talking to you in what feels like a lifetime ago, but probably like week 5 or week 6. And the Rams are this banged up team. Nobody's healthy. You got, we're talking about, you got to throw guys into the fire, see what you have, see if you can come out the other side of this thing.
Find out who your gangsters are, yeah.
And the trade deadline is part of it as well. There were rumors that they might trade guys off if the season gets away from them. And now they control their destiny in the NFC West after one of the most entertaining wins of the season. I'm curious, you checked in with Sean McVay after this one. What's the vibe there? Where do they see themselves going from here?
I actually talked to him right when he got in his car and started driving home from the stadium. And, Sean and I talk usually after every game. And some of it's to get him out of the tank, and some of it's to remind him, hey, man, like we said, find those gangsters. Because when the cavalry comes back, you're going to have a couple guys that step up that you really didn't know you had, that you could add with and win with. Kind of like last year with Puka. Like, they didn't know what Puka was going to be until that first game of the season. They know about him in camp. First game, it was the first drive, actually, where they saw like a different level. Like, oh, man, this guy's different on fight night. But it was interesting because I said, hey, Sean, you guys you took King Kong to the brink against the Lions in week 1, right? With a really banged up team. Now you did it again, and you beat King Kong with the Bills. That's who your team needs to be. That's the baseline. The problem is they're like bipolar. Sometimes they go out there like against the Eagles. They're awful. And sometimes they go against the Lions and the Bills, and you're like, oh, man, we don't want to face this team. If they can realize, it's up to these players. If the players can realize this is our new baseline, and they believe, and they play much more mistake-free football, because that was the problem. They're kind of hurting themselves. That's one of those teams down the stretch. You're like, I don't think I really want to face them. And they're a very dangerous team when those weapons are really going. But I'll tell you the other thing that Sean McVay didn't tell me, but other coaches and players told me. In the last 2 weeks, they've really seen Sean kind of have more faith in the offense in his coaches, Michael LaFleur and Dave Helman, so he can then go and kind of touch every area of the team. Go spend more time with defense, spend more time with special teams, spend more time with the offense. But it's not just offense. It used to just be, hey, as the offensive coordinator, he's spending all his time there. He's now building the rest of the culture so they take on his personality, and you saw it against the Bills.
I'm sure that's a hard thing for him to do, too, as much as he's tied to the play calling and the quarterback position.
He still calls the plays, but he's now, at least he has more trust where he's like, you know what? These guys are great. He loves Dave Helman and Michael LaFleur. So he's able to really trust those guys and hand it to him, so he can go put his little touch on every other area of the team. Because Sean's a fighter. Sean will fight you before you'll fight him. And that's how you want everybody to be.
I said it yesterday. I mean, you're so right. The good version of that team is among the scariest in the NFL. They just got to be consistent moving
Yeah. And
forward.
then, like where they got, really hurt a lot of times during the years, they'd have some of these backups who sometimes they're capable and sometimes they have a mistake at the worst, most inopportune time and a mistake that's like football 101. Like, dude, where are you going on this play? Like, why would you possibly shift over here? Like an offensive lineman suddenly going right when he's clearly should go left, and just little things like that. But man, like I said, if you can find those gritty guys in the storm, then when you become the storm, you become a much more violent storm.
They looked like the storm against the Bills. That's for damn sure. Let's talk about a report that you had on Sunday that definitely made me do a double take. You said Sunday morning, Aidan Hutchinson is using one of the fancy underwater treadmills that NFL teams have.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves because you got to get through the playoffs first, but you said there's sort of a target date for when he might be available.
There's a hope. Which, obviously when it first happened, you're like, oh man, he's done. But when you talk to people in there, he's one of those guys who are different. He's just, his work ethic's different. He's a freak of nature. Now, what they have to, it's really also the timeline of when that bone heals. And then once the bone heals, can they get enough practice time in? But at first they said maybe Super Bowl, but now, yeah, he's running an underwater treadmill. He's walking, as I was told, he's walking on land. I didn't know any other way to put it because that's how it was told to me. But he's supposed to use a cane, but he's not really because he's Aiden, right? And yeah, he's giving them hope because of how hard he works. And some guys are great healers. They really are. Some guys are good healers, some guys are not good healers. And there is at least a hope, and it's coming from different areas of that locker room, of if they get that first round bye, and if they can win that first game, maybe get them out there practice and possibly the NFC Championship game. When it first was, it was I would say very optimistic for the Super Bowl. Now they have a little more optimism. It could be before that. But again, it doesn't really matter what we say.
Sure.
Because it's really how the bone heals. But the fact that they're the ones watching it, and they're the ones going, oh man, this guy's ahead of what we thought he'd be right now because of how much he attacks things. He is, and I'm told he is just attacking that rehab. That yeah, they're hopeful that it could be then. Now we won't have answers till then, until that we know that bone is solidified. But there's definitely hope in there.
It's crazy. I'm not going to project too much onto it, but if they
And
can
I'm
hold on,
what I'm told by different areas of that organization, not just one guy.
yeah, if they can hold on to that bye, that means you got to win one playoff game to have a hope of getting your best defensive player back on the field. I mean, that would be such an incredible story.
And look, I know they see him too, what he's doing there. So that's why that hope is going from hope to optimism.
You know, I saw a wide range of outcomes for the New York Jets this season, but I don't think no part of me thought that they would be mathematically eliminated with a month to play. Like maybe the season doesn't go as well as I thought, but mathematically eliminated. And you had a report Sunday about all the things Aaron Rodgers is dealing with and how he has won over his teammates playing through all these injuries. It makes me curious where things go from here with him, not just playing out the rest of this season, but beyond that as well.
Well, first of all, yeah, he has fought through a grade 2 hamstring strain, which is a tear, an MCL, a high ankle sprain, several other things. That's why he's having a hard time moving. I think this week was the first week he did not need to go spend all this time in the trainer's room since like week 2. But then as a result of that, you saw how different he was yesterday, throwing for 300 yards, getting that offense going. And it makes you go, oh man, what if? I know it makes them also think, man, what if he wasn't so banged up? Because as the injuries start piling up, it just made it a lot harder for him to move the way he wanted to move, get himself out of trouble. And that's really Aaron's magic. Aaron's magic is when the play breaks down, that second play starts, as a defense, you're screwed. And, for him though, he's got to be able to move the way he used to be as effective when that second play starts, if you will. So yeah, but there was it was a report about Woody Johnson wanting him benched, and last week Jeff Ulbrich said after the game, did he say I think he said like, hey, I've got to see the film. I don't remember what it was, something along, but it put up in question. But there was no question because the locker room was like, no, we want to ride and die with Aaron. We want to go. And again, I think they all looked at him going, We know what he's done. We know how much pain he's played through. We know what he's done for us out there, and they still wanted to go with Aaron.
It's hard for me to imagine that a new regime wants to go with a 40-plus-year-old quarterback with an injury history, but it is interesting if this locker room is that one over on him. I mean, he's already under contract for next year. Like that raises my eyebrow about what that conversation might be like.
It's hard for me to see him wanting to come back with Woody Johnson too, though, knowing that he wanted him benched. And look, here's the other thing. Oh, I got to tell you something funny. So once news came out this week that Woody Johnson's not going to be part of Donald Trump's, team again, where last regime he went over
an ambassador,
ambassador, right? Man, this depression and gloom swept over that organization. Like, oh no, he's staying. Oh, because they love Christopher Johnson there. They love him, absolutely love him, and just real talk. And there's definitely there was a collective depression, and then there was a joke too, a little inside joke there of all the things that have happened to them this year, like yesterday, losing that game the way they did. It was like, can only strike it up the curse of Woody. Now it's becoming the curse of Woody, and so there was a collective once they found out that Woody is not going to go overseas and is going to be there. It's not going to be Christopher Johnson. It's going to be Woody. I can't imagine a scenario. This is just me again, it's not entirely up to him and Aaron and all that stuff because he is under contract. But I don't, and it's up to whoever the new GM head coach is going to be also. Yeah. They're going to be in position for a great draft pick. But I would be, I don't know how that one's going to play out, but I know Woody and Aaron, I don't see them taking hikes in Malibu anytime soon together.
Very interesting waters that everyone's going to have to navigate there. Let's talk about
Aaron lives like a block from me in Malibu, and I'm going to be watching binoculars just to see if him and Woody are, kind of taking these hikes over here, right over this mountain over here. And I'm just, I'm looking every day. Just don't see it. Your
Wi-Fi seems great though. Aaron said he has no, Aaron said his Wi-Fi doesn't work at the house.
Now he would.
Aaron? No.
It was funny too because where he is correct, your cell service here sucks. Can't get cell service, but you do get Wi-Fi. But the other problem here is, I'll say this too, like today, to probably turn our power off because we have these Santa Ana winds. Last time we had them, we had to evacuate our house because we had these fires, and it goes on for like 2 or 3 days where we have no power, so we have no cell service, we have no internet, no nothing. So that does happen quite a bit. So they're trying to call them within those 3-day period. Yeah. And that we may be looking at it tonight, but the rest of the time, Aaron's full of shit.
We're learning so much about the communication patterns in Malibu. I'm gonna come up and see if I can find Aaron and Woody on one of these hikes in the off season. Maybe
I'm looking every day. I'm looking at it right now. It's not gonna happen. Nope, can't see it. I don't see a kumbaya thing going.
The Atlanta Falcons completely melted down in the fourth quarter on Sunday against Minnesota. Kirk Cousins has thrown two interceptions yesterday, 6 in the last 2 weeks. Falcons have lost 4 straight. It feels like it's spiraling. I resisted thinking about this because I didn't believe it. But with as bad as things are getting and as poorly as Kirk is playing, do you put any credence into the idea that the Falcons consider a change with Michael Penix sitting there on the bench?
I asked for him more straight out. He said no. It's because once you do that, it's like a forever thing. They're also 1 game behind. And he said, right. And then I asked him again after the game yesterday. He's like, dude, we put up 500 yards of offense. Is their defense really faltered? So he's like, no. And, I'm sure he's going to get more and more frustrated as it goes. And then I said to him, hey, is it Kirk's? And Kirk just seems like he has a hard time moving and planting, even with some handoffs. And he said, it's not the Achilles, man. He's just beat up like everybody else is this time. We just have to kind of calm him down in certain situations, which they worked on a lot this week. But he didn't think the offense was really the issue as much after this game. But, that's the problem when you do draft a Michael Penix is when you do go through adversity, those calls to move on are very, 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 very loud. But also, like, people just automatically assume Penix is going to come in and be an upgrade. We don't know. We haven't seen him. Rookies usually struggle. You got no idea, right? So Kirk's had some games that have been fantastic, but you don't know. They know where Michael Penix's evolution as a quarterback is to a point. They don't know how he's going to be with live bullets on this level yet. And I don't know if you want to do that really with your one game out of first place.
I tend to agree with you. Like I said, I resisted this conversation for at least a week or two because you're inviting a whole bunch of problems onto yourself by doing this. But
once you take that toothpaste out of the tube, man, you can't put it back in the tube.
But you're so right, though. The fact that he is there invites this conversation. It's bound to happen. I think the division is still there for you. They swept the Buccaneers, so they have a tiebreaker on them. I think it would be rash, but the conversation's only going to get louder with each interception that Kirk throws. Let's wrap it up. Another rookie quarterback. There's no controversy in Denver. I just loved the tidbit you had about Bo Nix on Sunday about Sean Payton said he would go to his house to tell him he'd been drafted, and also he would have drafted him number 1 overall. I have a hard time believing that, but that's what I'm hearing.
No, man, he was so convicted. And I know because he started telling me in March. And then what happens also during the draft, at least for me, is guys will ask, where do I need to do to move up? How do I go here? How do I go there? And it's a great way. I'm an information broker in that way. And Sean was getting some bad information that the Rams were drafting him. And the Rams had no interest in grabbing a quarterback. And I even said to Sean McVay, would you mind if I tell Sean Payton the truth here? Because he's thinking of jumping all the way up, and he doesn't really need to do it. He goes, yeah, you can help him out. And that was like on draft day, I think. But he was like convinced. But he really was like the day before, he's like, here's how much I love this guy. And Sean's crazy. Let's just put it out there. Sean's crazy. And this is coming from a crazy man over here. But he said, I got this idea. I'm going to fly to where he is. And when it's our turn to pick, I'm going to knock on the door. I'm going to make the pick live just to show everybody that this has been my guy all along. And I was like, dude, it's not like you need frequent flyer miles, Sean. Just call the dude and do it like everybody else. He goes, but I want everybody to know. I said, bro, everybody will know because you're going to tell everybody for the next freaking several months and several years. But you can't get, it was funny because Michael Strahan was with Sean this past week. They were in a golf tournament and Sean's bye week. And Stray and I were like, even on the set, you can't go 0.3 seconds without Sean Payton bringing up Bo Nix. This guy's a stud. He's incredible. He's this, that. But it's not just Sean. It's everybody in there. He's not a rookie quarterback. The way he carries himself. He's also, dude, he's a big quarterback. I think people don't realize how big of a dude he is. But Sean had him pegged. It started, he loved them going into like the personal workouts. But the night of the personal workout, he gave this guy so many plays that he had to remember that night. And I think he had several different private workouts. And then the next morning had to come back and regurgitate it all. And Sean said, this guy regurgitated like it was his 10th year in. And then he had all these things said. Everybody who had these knocks on him, we did a deeper dive on why certain numbers, where they were. He was in love with them. Yeah. And would he have taken him over the other quarterbacks? Yeah, he would have. And I think he loved Jaden Daniels, like Caleb a lot, but he loved what Bo would do for him the same way that Drew Brees and him were able to connect. He just knew that he would connect with Bo the way he connected with Drew. And that's why he was just so in on him.
Also, I think we've given Bo Nix a lot of flowers here over the last 5-6 weeks for the way that he's played. But
and by the way, they have all this dead money too that they've had they don't really have a receiving core that right. They have a hodgepodge of running backs. They got some offensive line, but it's really a no-name team. They've had to deal with all this dead money, right? And we have an off season where they can start building weapons around Bo Nix. Bo Nix is going to be in this conversation with Sean Payton in that division and the conference and everything for a long time.
And if that comes to pass, Sean Payton caught a lot of shit for making him the 6th quarterback taken. Everybody's like, 6? How are we doing 6 quarterbacks in one first round?
Right. But by the way, I say Sean is crazy. In order to be great, you got to have some crazy.
Absolutely. You gotta toe that line. Absolutely. And it's going to be fun to watch. Denver can put I don't know if they can clinch it, but they can put a hand on a wild card spot if they beat the Colts this weekend. So that's a big opportunity for Bo Nix. We'll see how he does it. Jay?
Vance Joseph needs to be considered for a head coaching job because he has just a bunch of no-name players. Like, look what he's done with those guys over there. He's bailed the offense out several times, right? And my God, the way he is, they become a really aggressive team, a ton of turnovers, sacks from guys who you're like, who is this guy? Who? From who? What? Like, he's turning these guys into Pro Bowlers. And Vance, look, when he was in Denver the first time, it was different. A lot of guys that kind of learned their second way around. He didn't really have a terrible tenure first time around.
Right.
Vance Joseph, I think, needs to be considered for a head coaching job.
We talked about him as a guy needing more credit. And yeah, I mean, Nick Bonito is making a defensive player of the year case. Yeah. Obviously, you got Patrick Surtain. Fantastic defense there. Yeah.
That's about it. Allen's really good. But again, it's like
Allen.
Yeah, but player. Bonito, you wouldn't have been talking about him earlier this year.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's been a hell of a job. One of the most surprising teams in the NFL. Can't wait to see.
And I remember I was there. They were scrimmaging with the Packers. And I remember coming off the field with Matt LaFleur, and he was livid with his offense because of what that defense did to him. He's like, they confused us so much. And he turned to me and goes, dude, Vance is good. Like, Vance is really good. And I went in the show and I said, hey, man, I know you get down all your coaches here. You hear what LaFleur said about Vance? He's like, what do you say? And I told him, it's just like, Vance needs some credit.
We just got to do story time where you tell us what these coaches are telling you about each other's schemes and draft plans and all that type of stuff.
Sean Payton, Sean McVay was pretty funny. Because I don't know who Sean Payton got that information from, but it was so off base, and he was convinced that the Rams were drafting Bo Nix. And for a while, like Sean McVay's like, no, don't tell him, don't tell anybody. And then I was just like, I called him like, it was the day of the draft. I'm like, dude, he's really suffering. And I don't want him to go up and spend all his capital when it ain't got nothing to do with you. Because the Rams were trying to trade up, but it was for Bowers.
I was going to say, meanwhile, McVay's eyeing Brock Bowers, which imagining what Brock Bowers could be doing in that offense is a whole different conversation. But
absolutely. And they thought they were going to move up with Atlanta. And then Atlanta, of all things, took Penix. They thought that was going to happen. But it was just little like, so credit to Sean McVay too, saying, all right, there's honor amongst thieves here. Yeah, let him off the hook. Like, Sean didn't even really look at quarterbacks. It's like, we're not drafting one. So he didn't really even look at any of them. Like, did a little bit, but he knew they weren't drafting one, so he didn't spend any time on it. And again, Sean Payton got some bad information that they were snowing everyone, and they were going up, and they were drafting them. By the way, though, Sean Payton did a great job of getting everybody to come out, saying that they're trying to move up for J.J. McCarthy. And it was not at one point ever, not once, for J.J. McCarthy. Never. He did a great job snowing people on that.
I'm going to check in with you in draft season because there's just too much. There's too much good
Fox Sports Radio, man. We always have it pegged.
There's too much good stuff here. We'll have to check in about that later. Jay, this was a fun one, man.
Why guys tell me stuff on the draft? Because I don't do a mock draft. Because I'm not going to lie to the fans. Because when guys tell me, this is what we want, but you can't say anything, Glaze. You could say it when you're on radio. We're fine with that. When you're doing your job. But you can't if we're going to tell you, you can't say it. Okay. But then I can't turn around and lie to the fans. So
tells
me what's going on.
That is very smart, because if you pay attention, when you read the right mock drafts, you can say, oh, he knows, he talked to that coach. That's where he got that pick from. So very smart on your part.
I also know who's going where, a lot of it, and I can see who's getting snowed on what. And I'm like, oh man, they'll have this guy going here, and it's not even close. Like, a lot of times when it's usually resounding for a place, I'm like, man, you guys do a really good job of in unison snowing the world. And half the time, I'll see guys, they're on every mock draft, and they're not even on a team's draft board. Like, they're pulled off the board.
I'm getting excited for mock draft season. Like, the draft nerd in me is coming to the surface right now. But we'll have to save this for later on in the year. Jay, this was a fun one, man. It was good seeing you. I'll talk to you soon.
God bless.
We don't give Jay Glazer copies of our rundowns, but very prescient work on his part today, stumping for Sean Payton, the wonderful job that he's doing in Denver, because it leads into the larger conversation we want to have on this Tuesday episode. And to have it, we're going to bring in Fox Sports reporter Carmen Vitali.
Hi.
We're going to talk about the Coach of the Year conversation, Carmen, because it's something you and I have been talking about for a couple weeks at this point.
Mhm.
Jay mentioned one of the many candidates in Sean Payton, and that's the thing. It's low-key stressing me out. This feels like the widest pool
Yeah.
of the most deserving candidates we've had for Coach of the Year in a long, long time. You know, last year, pretty solid group of guys. Dan Campbell was part of it last year as well. D'Amico Ryans and the turnaround he had in Houston. Kevin Stefanski wound up winning it for the job that he did in Cleveland with all the quarterback injuries. Throw Kyle Shanahan in there as well. It was robust, but it by the end of the year, it felt a lot smaller.
Right.
We're here a month away from the end of the season.
Yeah.
We had to come up with a list of people we wanted to talk about for Coach of the Year. And we had to first of all, we had to cut the list down to just 5 to focus on for winners, which is insane. Then had a list of 10 that we want to mention. And even then you got to cut out deserving names like the job Sean McVay's doing with LA, punctuated by that win against Buffalo on Sunday. We're not going to talk about him at all, which feels crazy. But that's how many coaches are doing such a good job. So we're not making predictions here so much. We're not trying to figure out how the last month of the season is going to go. I just want to give people a good idea of where we stand and just how many NFL head coaches have truly done a hell of a job.
Yeah, the list it's a long list of very deserving coaches that have really good cases to win this award. And you're right, cutting it down to 10 was even hard because there are guys that have the 5 biggest odds, but there are guys sitting just outside of that are absolutely as deserving. And I do think a lot of it has to do with the lens that you view this award through. Are you giving this to the guy that, the team is sitting in the number 1 seed in the conference, they're the Super Bowl favorites, all that kind of stuff? Or are you giving it to the guy that surpassed expectations for his team when you think about what they were projected to do this season? And this award is just so subjective that because of that, you can now build cases based on whichever lens you're looking through.
And we're going to see that as a theme in this conversation. And you're so right. Like if you go back and look at past winners, it is so often an award given to a coach whose team comes out of nowhere and exceeds expectations, or it's almost like a pat on the back for being the best team in the NFL. Like, hey, here's one more trophy. It's like winning best picture. Like, well, you've probably won everything else. Let's throw one more thing onto the list of awards that you've won. And there's so many different ways you can take it. All right. So spoiler alert, we're using the help of Las Vegas here. We took the 5 best odds makers' chances to win this, and we'll break them down in greater detail. But that means we had to leave a lot of deserving names off the list. I want to just run them down and give them a shout out. I think it's crazy. It speaks to how good of a conversation this is this year. That one of the first name out, in my opinion, Dan Quinn, would be one of the stories of the year in any other season. Takes over the head coaching job in Washington, the most moribund franchise in recent
What a
NFL
great
history.
word. Good job.
Thank you so much.
Such a good vocabulary.
98 percentile in my SATs. One of the most hopeless franchises, especially now that the Lions have also been turned around. Jaden Daniels comes in, takes them from 4-13, improves their scoring defense. They're looking like a lock to make the playoffs, and almost feels like an afterthought. Mainly, and I think the culprit here is, I don't want to call it a second half swoon because they do look very likely to make the postseason, but you start 7-2, you now sit at 8-5. There are just many, many other teams, as we're going to get to, that have exceeded what Washington is doing, which is crazy because this is one of the best feel-good stories we've had in a minute.
Yeah, and I think the handling of a first-round quarterback and the way that they were able to ease him in, and obviously Dan Quinn's on the defensive side of things, but having the staff to support Jaden Daniels and oversee this entire rebuild in Washington to have results this quickly. You're so right. This speaks to just how crowded this field still is, that this is the first guy we're talking about as out of it as far as can he actually win this award, because there's just not a strong enough case when it stacks up to some of these other guys. That's not to say there's not a strong case. I mean, basically every unit
There's an
of the
amazing
Washington
case.
Commanders has outperformed expectations this season, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's that defense that was able to be switched around so quickly by Dan, whether it was Jaden Daniels or their running game. This was everything about the Washington Commanders exceeded expectations.
I don't feel good about the next guy we're going to leave off either, and that's Sean McDermott.
Yeah, I really don't feel good about that.
I said it last week. I think he deserves mention in this conversation, and losing that game to the LA Rams does not dissuade me of that. I know there were some dicey moments there.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the goal line decisions at the end of the game where you burn a timeout on a quarterback sneak. Game management, maybe not Sean McDermott's forte, but still a team that did a soft roster reset this year.
Yeah.
You part ways with both of your star safeties. You let go of Gabe Davis.
Yeah, it was your top two
You
receivers.
trade Stephon Diggs away. Matt Milano goes down in August. All this stuff that said the Bills were supposed to take a step back, and this might be the best team of the Bills, Sean McDermott and Josh Allen era, mainly because Josh Allen is playing like an MVP, but the Bills defense has been a borderline top 10 unit for this entire season.
Yes.
It feels wrong that this is a guy that is almost an afterthought in the conversation, but I do think that speaks to how high the bar is in Buffalo.
It's so interesting because for the reasons that I think Josh Allen is the top contender right now for MVP is because I keep saying, well, who is doing more with less? And that applies to Josh Allen. And that's, again, why I think he's at the top of that list. But it also applies to Sean McDermott, if not even more so. And yet we're leaving him off the top 5, which I don't feel good about it at all.
I don't feel good about it either. I'm letting narrative guide me here, and that's definitely not fair, but it's just the reality of the situation. The Bills looked like they had a great chance to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. They still technically could, but it's down below 20% after this loss to the Rams. When you talk about a team that's now won 5 straight division titles, a couple 13-win seasons in there, they've been the 2 seed several times. I feel like to get that jump where you finally win an award like this, it needed to maybe be your best season ever. Is it fair? No. Is this an incredibly crowded picture?
It still could end up being their best season ever, but we won't know that when this award ends up coming out. That's the hard part.
How you do in the postseason also does not factor in.
Right. That's the hard part about all of this is because if this is the Bills' year, then I don't think there's any doubt that Sean McDermott should be one of the finalists for it, but we just won't know that.
I'm going to give you the floor for the next guy because I do think, and I'm with you. He's done a fantastic job, but I think their Thursday night loss to the Detroit Lions, and they meaning Green Bay Packers.
I know where you're going with this.
It pushed Matt LaFleur out of this conversation, in my humble opinion.
Or did it? That's my thing, is when you watch that game, and I don't know if this is because I am so entrenched in what the Bears have been doing, the Chicago Bears have been doing this season, but when I watched that game between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers on Thursday night, nationally televised primetime game, it was a coaching clinic. These guys were trading blows back and forth the entire game. That game was not the game at Lambeau Field, which I think if you wanted to use that as maybe the reason why Matt LaFleur is being left off this list, I think that's you'd be more justified in doing that, because this last game in Detroit at Ford Field was a complete toss-up. It could have gone either way because both of these coaches were coaching their asses off. Just the situations that happen with Jordan Love in the third quarter, where he tries to get, the Lions to jump off sides before the quarter expires, knowing they're not going to run a play, but he has the wherewithal to do that. He's got the tools to do all that. That is because of Matt LaFleur. And then you go back to before the half with Dan Campbell and the Lions, where just the game management was beautiful, all of it. And you got right down to the end of that and it went back and forth. I looked at that game and was like, these are 2 of the best coaches in the league, if not the top 2, which is why I think Matt LaFleur should have higher odds than he does. But at the same time, I get it. I understand why he's being left off right now. And I think there's some Green Bay Packers fatigue put into this as well, Like they're kind of
I
just
don't
doing
mean-
what
I-
you expected them to do.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's Green Bay Packers fatigue.
I think that plays into it.
I
I
think
really
it's
do.
look, somebody's got to come in third in the most competitive division in the NFL, and right now it looks like it's going to be the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah. But
I get
what
it.
he was
Look,
able to do, the case for him,
it's incredible.
like what he was able to do with Malik Willis.
He
as a
weathered the
starter,
loss of Jordan Love. He coached Malik Willis to 3. He coached the Packers to 3 wins.
Three
with
wins
Malik
with
Willis as
Malik Willis.
quarterback.
Yes.
He identified Jeff Hafley, who has turned
brought
around
him
the
in,
Packers
turned
defense.
around the defense. There's still a little bit left to be desired. But I also think that the difference in the Green Bay Packers before and after their bye week needs to be talked about too, both offensively and defensively. They have shot up in productivity on both sides of the ball because that bye week is something that Matt LaFleur is so good at taking advantage of and resetting everything, self-scouting, figuring out what the weaknesses on the team are, and then ironing those out. And you see that on defense specifically with the amount of pressure that they're getting since the bye. That's the case for him. But I guess I understand if you're third in this division. I've been of the thought that the coach of the year is coming out of the NFC North.
There aren't many coaches that I would choose over Matt LaFleur if I was hiring one tomorrow. Like, I absolutely think he's
But
on
two
the
of them
choice.
happen to be in the same division.
Two of them happen to share a division and have arguably, I don't even know if you would say arguably, have definitively, to this point, with a month to play, done a better job.
Yeah.
It's tough, and that's why we're talking about him early. Got that out of the way. We'll do the next one quickly. Nick Sirianni is a name that I think is worth mentioning. I think it's officially time to say that he doesn't get the credit he deserves. We're here at the end of year 4.
I don't know how Eagles fans will feel about you saying that, but they're a tough group to please.
It's Philadelphia. You're only as good as what happened the last time. Like we're just 6 weeks removed from when he was chirping at fans after the Cleveland game. It was literally Sunday that
it's only been 6 weeks since then. Jeez.
time flies when you're having fun, man. It was Sunday that half the Eagles roster was disgruntled about the way they beat the Panthers. Like it's a volatile environment, but Nick Sirianni's won 70% of his games. He is 11-2. He's closing in on a second NFC East title. I think they could clinch, if not they could clinch the division as early as this weekend if they get a win and Washington gets a loss. So,
and the team is trending upward too. When you talk about last year where there was maybe an element of fraudulence to them, they had a -10 turnover margin, which is kind of what the easiest metric to use when you're talking about is a team for real. This season +4 in turnover margin. So like you've cleaned up a lot of stuff on both sides of the ball to make that happen. And you're averaging just an obscene amount of rushing yards and offense given what you have in Saquon. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't call the plays, but he put that all, in motion, got the coordinators he wanted, and that's resulted in productivity.
That's ultimately why I don't think he gets serious consideration, because as a CEO head coach, it's all about the hires you make. Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen were incredible. Yep. They spearheaded a Super Bowl run. They are both successful head coaches right now. They're both in the playoff hunt in their own right at their new jobs. Last year, disaster.
Yeah.
And the Eagles season was a disaster. This year, Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore doing a great job, and the Eagles are great. Is it fair that Nick Sirianni won't get a ton of credit for that? Not really, but that perception is reality, and the perception is you make the hires, and how good they are dictates how good the team is. And ultimately, unless I will say, if the Eagles can steal the 1 seed from the Detroit Lions, we may revisit this conversation in another month. But right now, I feel comfortable.
I was going to say there's another similarity here with the Detroit Lions that we'll get into.
The last one I want to mention is the most insane of all.
This, honestly, I had never really thought about it until we talked about this off air before.
What are we going to, what's Andy Reid have to do to win this award? Because he has won it in 2002 as the then up-and-coming head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. He won it the second out of 4 straight years that the Eagles made the NFC Championship game. That was 20-plus years ago. Meanwhile, the Chiefs just won their 9th straight AFC West title. 12 straight winning seasons in Kansas City. They've never had a losing record when he's been the Chiefs head coach. 11 trips to the playoffs, and I'm burying the lead, 3 Super Bowls with a chance at a fourth and the first three-peat in the
NFL history.
Well, in Super Bowl era history.
Super Bowl era
we'll
history, yes.
If you want to, talk about the 1965 through 67 Green Bay Packers,
right,
we can do that if you want to. Point is, he's overseeing one of the most successful runs in NFL history. And on top of that, this might be his opus, especially on offense. Think of what the Chiefs are dealing with.
Right.
I know everybody's sick of the Chiefs' black magic. I get it. It's crazy to watch, but
you lose into between the field goal break.
You lose Hollywood Brown at the beginning of the year. You lose Rashee Rice early in week 4. The injury he sustains getting brought down by his own player, by the way. Isaiah Pacheco has missed the vast majority of this season. Left tackle's a revolving door. Like, this has not been fun.
No.
Other than the final record. And they just keep churning along.
The Chiefs they've won 15 straight one-score games. So of the one-score games they played, they won the last 15. And that's when you see how little the margin for error really is. And that's where coaching comes into play, though. When you do have just such a the difference between winning and losing is a play, maybe a couple. And how you behave in certain situations, how aggressive you are in certain situations throughout the game can dictate what that final score is. And the Chiefs are coming out of the winning side of this. And as much as you want to talk about, them selling their souls or this being preordained or whatever it is, let me ask you, what is the reason that we will not count out the Chiefs ever?
Number 15 in the red and white uniform. And Andy Reid.
Yeah. It is the combination of Patrick Mahomes emboldened and empowered by such an incredibly innovative scheme that changes every single year, changes sometimes during the year, changes in the postseason. That's what I think goes so far under the radar, is that the Chiefs do not behave like the same team once the postseason hits. We've seen that year in and year out, to where it's part of the reason for their sustained success, in that you cannot use film from the regular season to prepare for the Chiefs in the playoffs. That is not something you can do. And it's because of Andy Reid. It's because of all of the hours. I mean, he is one of those coaches that does sleep in the office. I don't know if he does it as much now that he's gotten a little bit older, but he's notorious for stuff like that. And you're right. He has never won it as the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, of the dynasty that we are seeing in real time in Kansas City, the architect of all of this. And he hasn't won Coach of the Year. We're leaving him off.
even if you want to give Patrick Mahomes the lion's share of the credit, Andy Reid oversaw the drafting and developing of Patrick Mahomes,
which was also not of the norm. I mean, you had Alex Smith, and you had the wherewithal to keep him in there, even though you drafted a quarterback in the first round. And having that sort of patience is just, it's not common. It's not realistic for a lot of teams. So, I mean, that speaks to Chiefs management, ownership, all that, giving you the leeway to do that. But to have the wherewithal to say, okay, I want to ease this guy in, I want to do this right, and know exactly how to develop these quarterbacks. I think that Patrick Mahomes would be successful wherever he is, but I don't think that it's up for debate that Andy Reid knows exactly how to maximize Patrick Mahomes' abilities, to the point where it is so collaborative too. That's why the Chiefs look different year in and year out, even with all of the personnel changes and all that other stuff. I mean, Patrick Mahomes can bring a play to Andy and say like, this is something I was thinking about. What if we just did this? And Andy Reid will design a play that's actually viable to go along with that.
Corn dog. On top of all of that, even if you're a believer that the players make the coach, Bill Belichick won Coach of the Year 3 different times during the Patriots run.
With Tom Brady.
I big red pilled myself while I was doing research for this, where I was just like, I think I'd vote for Andy Reid. Even if this isn't the year, and it arguably is, like I said, like this might be his most impressive coaching job yet. But like, even if you don't feel that way, we gotta get this guy one of these awards on his resume. It's an injustice. But
you said that Packers fatigue didn't come into play with Matt LaFleur.
Chiefs fatigue
comes into play. There's no doubt in my mind.
He's plus 2,500 to win Coach of the Year.
It's wild.
It's crazy. Having said that, I think he is the most viable. And if the Chiefs go 15-1, I'm not ruling it out that he could still win it. But now we get into the 5. Oh, God. How am I still doing 16 games? It's been 4 years at this point.
I mean, our formative years were spent with 16 game seasons.
16-1. Feels very on the table unless the Chiefs sit their starters, which they absolutely might. Anyway, top 5 odds getters now, because
I do like the fact
all
that
of those
we've used
very
Vegas.
deserving candidates are.
I know we've used Vegas as cop-outs. I appreciate it. Like it rids us of any.
Is it a cop-out or do they know?
I mean,
know.
Vegas do be knowing.
They do be knowing.
Vegas do be knowing. But like this was easy to be like, oh, we'll just take the top 5 in odds, and we don't have to own any of this because. And I that's why I appreciate going through the other 5, in that like these are guys that we believe have cases, but these are what the odds say.
As we go through this, I think you'll see. I think the odds are well placed, honestly.
Yeah,
and whether it's Chiefs fatigue or whatever else, I do think those numbers are reflective of what's going to happen in the 5 spot. Plus 550 right now this week. Longest current odds of the guys we're going to talk about moving forward. It's Jim Harbaugh of the LA Chargers.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that he is where he is. I do think it makes sense that he's as far back as 5th. Yes. Chargers 8-5, but they did just lose the AFC West to the Chiefs, and they've dropped 2 of the last 3. This is a big picture consideration for him, though. It's not about how hot they finish. Honestly, they've already. Well, actually, interestingly enough, did you know the Chargers preseason over/under total was 8.5?
Oh.
So they still haven't quite cleared it.
Okay.
Which is amazing, because I would have guessed it was much lower.
The confidence that
people had in
Jim Harbaugh being able to turn it around.
And he is delivering on that.
Oh,
okay. So they're 1 win away from topping that total. And this was a team that the money told you that they were resetting, that they were aiming for the big picture here. I mean, they traded Keenan Allen to Chicago. Mm-hmm. They cut Mike Williams. They miraculously got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa to agree to pay cuts in the offseason. Will Dissly, the only like major money that they spent on their roster in the offseason. And yet 8-5, 1 win away from passing that total. They're almost virtually assured of a playoff spot, 91% chance to make the playoffs. If they manage to go 3-1 here over the home stretch, they would have they would tie their best record since 2018, which I think is pretty incredible.
That is.
So, needless to say, I think the Chargers are getting their money's worth for luring Jim Harbaugh out of the college game.
They are. And the buy-in, I think, when you're talking about all the tangible things that you just ran through, which is true. And you look at all the stats that are on the side of me here.
Best scoring defense in the NFL.
Hiring Jesse Minter, identifying that, knowing that, he could lead this defense and it be one of the best defenses in the league, while also very incrementally kind of shifting the offense around, right? We saw in the beginning of the year where it looked like a Jim Harbaugh offense that run the damn ball, really good line with a really good run game. And then you're like, but wait a second, you have Justin Herbert. And now we're seeing, oh yeah, you have Justin Herbert. You were just kind of like, easing this all in and flipping it as you saw fit. But I think the intangible part of all of this is the buy-in that Jim Harbaugh has gotten from his players and the way that he does that. I mean, if you ever heard him talk about Justin Herbert?
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's awesome. He is just. Even when he wasn't even
looks
using
like
Justin
treats
Herbert.
him like he's his actual son.
Yes. Like, I don't know any of Harbaugh's kids, but I have to imagine them like having complexes about like, am I your son or is Justin? You spend more time with Justin, probably.
What if he punches all of his kids on the chest and calls them beast mode all the time too, though? Like
he probably does. I mean,
the self-belief that I would have if Jim Harbaugh was.
The world would be my oyster with the level of confidence Jim Harbaugh could instill in me if he was my father. Good Lord.
It's incredible.
But those are the kind of things, too, that you need to take into consideration when you're talking about a Coach of the Year award. And why I think that Jim Harbaugh's case is so strong is because, yes, there are all these tangible things that you can point to saying how much the Chargers exceeded expectations, though not record-wise, apparently, and turned around.
They will, though. They're going to win one more game.
This season, they are completely changing the Chargers chargering narrative. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, where that is no longer a thing under Jim Harbaugh, and people trust that this is sustainable. But more than that, it's the players believing in this system and believing in Jim Harbaugh and believing that they are on the right path. And I think that speaks to when you did get Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack to take pay cuts. How do you do that? You get their buy-in in other ways. And otherwise, that's not feasible. This roster isn't feasible. That defense is not feasible unless you get them to do that. And Jim Harbaugh was able to get them to do that. So I can't say enough about the intangibles that Jim Harbaugh brings and the confidence that people already had in him, given the fact that he has produced results at the NFL level as a head coach before.
And not that anybody had doubts, right? Because we saw the run that he had in San Francisco, but how much must it mean to anybody in that Chargers building right down the way here in El Segundo to see it pay off immediately?
Right.
5-12 team last year. Remember, they gave up 60 points to the Raiders on national TV, like right around this time of year last year. And it just felt like a low point across the entire league. And here they are 1 year later, vastly improving on that. They're going to go to the playoffs this year. Herbert's playing, he doesn't have gaudy numbers, but he's playing the cleanest football of his entire career.
Yes.
Hasn't thrown an interception since week 2 of the season. For it all to pay off as much as it has, the buy-in's going to be insane. I think this is going to be an attractive destination for free agents next year. Lot to be excited about. And I'll say it's not fair for the 100th time in this segment, but I could see people saying, oh, there's another year for Jim Harbaugh to win Coach of the Year because this is just the beginning of a nice little run for them. But the turnaround in 1 year is nothing short of incredible. And the crazy thing is, Vegas will tell you it's the second best turnaround in the AFC West. Because even though the Chargers are higher than the Broncos in the standings, Sean Payton has better odds at plus 500. He's got the 4th best odds. And I'll just say, I think Sean Payton got made fun of a lot from the time that he took this Broncos job for like choosing that job of all of the jobs to leave retirement for. The Russell Wilson situation, that very insane newspaper story 2 training camps ago where he called out Nathaniel Hackett and made an enemy of everybody in the Jets organization.
And everybody in the coaching world for a little bit. I mean, that's a fraternity, man. And that's not something that you see these guys do.
The saga with the, speculation that they wanted Russ to cut his pay or else they would bench him. And eventually Russ is out the door on his way to Pittsburgh. And then they draft Bo Nix. That's what we talked about with Jay Glazer today. Like, people laughed.
Yeah. No one thought that Bo Nix was a top 12 pick. No one thought Bo Nix was a top 12 pick, except apparently Sean Payton, according to Jay Glazer, who said that even with the even if he had the first overall pick, he would have taken Bo Nix because that was his dude.
He's got him playing like that. He's going to throw for 3,000 yards this year. He's going to throw for 20-plus touchdowns in his rookie year. Fun stat. Bo Nix threw 4 interceptions in his first 2 games. Seahawks and Steelers. 2 picks each in those games. He's thrown 4 in the other 11 games since. Just playing... And ironically, the last time we saw Bo, he did throw 2 picks in that ridiculous game against Cleveland, but very much playing efficient football.
There was some weird choo-choo going on during that game.
Sure was. Now, this is much less surprising. Denver's preseason win total set by Vegas was 5.5. They surpassed it weeks ago.
Yeah.
1 win away from a guaranteed winning record, 74% chance to make the playoffs. They play the Colts this weekend. If they beat Indy, that's their biggest competitor for a playoff spot.
Yep.
I don't think they clinch anything with a win against Indy, but it's got to go up into the 90th percentile. To have a playoff spot locked up this quickly with all the uncertainty, bringing back Vance Joseph, that's a decision that stretches to 2 years ago, but to get a guy to want to come coach for the franchise that fired him as their head coach is wild to me. And the performance that Vance Joseph is giving to Sean Payton in return.
Yes.
That's an incredible storyline. Jay mentioned that on the show. I think Vance Joseph will probably get head coaching looks this offseason, but that is a decision that goes back to Sean. Not that I thought Sean Payton couldn't turn the Broncos around, but I damn sure didn't think it would look this good this quickly. I'll readily admit that.
And the fact that it didn't look this good in the beginning, though. I mean, asking the organization to eat all of that money that Russell Wilson was going to cost you in dead cap, and then having them trust you to draft a quarterback that many didn't even have in the first round with a top 12 pick, and to base your franchise around that guy. And then, yes, to bring in a defensive coordinator that your organization, albeit under different ownership, fired. And now it looks like all of the things that we maybe rolled our eyes at or were questioning or whatever, they've paid off this year in particular, where you see the vision crystal clear. He has the buy-in of everybody on that team, including by his staff. It's an incredible job, and to weather the initial storm in taking that job over and then elevate them the next year when you finally get to put all of your fingerprints on it. Because I mean, that was the issues clearly were the things that Sean Payton inherited when he took that job. Now that he fully took the reins, was able to install the guys he wanted, was able to bring in the guys he wanted, it's all going so much better than any of us thought. There were so many question marks all across the Broncos roster coming into this season, and like offensively, defensively, and they have just shut everybody up. And Sean Payton, it's weird because we've seen him do this before. He did this with the New Orleans Saints.
He's won Coach of the Year before in 2006.
He won Coach of the Year in 2006. He, again, did some more unorthodox stuff to get Drew Brees and then turned him into a Hall of Famer. Not that, Brees doesn't have his own agency and obviously
they
has
go
his own
together.
talent, but
They
go
will
together.
be linked forever.
They will be linked forever on these teams. And the culture that Sean Payton built and turned around in New Orleans, I mean, they were a laughingstock before he got there. And the fact that there were doubts in Denver, that should have never been the case, clearly, because he's doing it all over again.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it, is that a lot of people have laughed at the Broncos over the last 2 years, and I don't think anybody's laughing.
Nobody's laughing
anymore.
now.
Would you believe me if I said we still have 3 more candidates to go?
I know.
Let's get in. It speaks to how crazy this is, but let's get into the last 3. I'm going to step out on a limb and say I think one of these 3 is going to win.
Yeah.
Let's start with that other guy in the NFC North. Kevin O'Connell, tied for the second best odds, plus 400. He is often overshadowed in his own division because of the success of the Detroit Lions. But, man, you're talking about coaching some ball. I don't know. I don't think anybody should overshadow KOC, man. Preseason win total set at 6.5. They entered the season, or they entered the off season. One of the first things they did was pay Sam Darnold $10 million. They turn around, they draft J.J. McCarthy. Darnold, you don't pay somebody $10 million not to give him a chance to play, but the preseason conversation was very much about how many games until McCarthy takes over for Darnold. Can the Vikings finish better than 4th in their division? Those were the conversations. Don't lie to me and tell me that you had higher aspirations unless you are a true blue Minnesota Viking diehard. Nobody else thought that way about this team. McCarthy goes down in the preseason. Feels like an afterthought now because look at what's happened. Sam Darnold is going to have a 4,000-yard season, Carmen.
Yes.
He's got 28 touchdowns. It's a career high already by a wide margin. 5 touchdowns last week. Could wind up with 2,000-yard receivers depending on how Jordan Addison finishes the season. And I know we evaluate these things in the prism or the vacuum of one season. But I refuse to forget what Kevin O'Connell did last year as
Thank
well.
You. Yes.
Off to a fantastic start with Kirk Cousins. They lose him in October. They get 3 wins out of Josh Dobbs and Jaron Hall.
Yes.
Get to the brink of playoff contention despite having all those problems at quarterback. He's a hell of a football coach, and he's doing it again this year.
Nick Mullins was part of that too. Don't forget.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to Nick Mullins for forgetting about him.
No, I've been shouting this from the rooftops since Kirk Cousins went down last year, and I have classified it as Kevin O'Connell's ability to play live action Madden. This man was taking control of the things that were happening in the headset, which cuts off 15 seconds before a play starts, and was literally dictating to Josh Dobbs, who had gotten there 3 days prior, hey, you're going to throw it to number 3, because Josh Dobbs didn't know the name of his receivers. He didn't know the name of the guys on the line blocking for him. He didn't know the play calls. He didn't know anything. He just said, hey, 3 is going to run a post route. You're going to throw it to him, but he's going to be your second read. Like, he's telling him all of this stuff before the headset cuts off, play in and play out, while also having to call the game himself, manage the game himself, do all of that kind of stuff. The job that Kevin O'Connell has done in Minnesota is incredible because his scheme also maximizes the personnel that he has available to him, whoever that is. So you talk about the quarterback. Sam Darnold, by the way, has the second best touchdown percentage. 7.3% of his passes go for touchdowns. Wild.
That is a wild number.
It's a wild number. Sam Darnold, first of all. But even more impressive, I think, which is wild to even say, Justin Jefferson is the league's best receiver. If you go to play the Minnesota Vikings, who is public enemy number 1? It is Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson leads the league currently in receiving yards. He is top 5 in touchdowns. How in the world do you get Justin Jefferson open when the entire defensive scheme revolves around shutting him down week in and week out? That's Kevin O'Connell. The way that he can scheme up Justin Jefferson to get open, it's because it's not, I mean, there is some, we saw it this last week, actually, Sam Darnold doing his best Patrick Mahomes and like scrambling around in the backfield and launching it.
Surprisingly good wheels.
Drops it
Sneaky
on a dime.
athlete.
Drops it on a dime to Justin Jefferson, who then goes in for the score. But more often than not, that's not the case. This isn't the case of a quarterback and his number 1 receiver just being on the same page and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It is the way the routes are designed, the different levels that you can get Justin Jefferson at, the way, like where you can just line him up all over the field at every different wide receiver spot. And then you can fall back on a guy like Jordan Addison, who at 5'10", I think he is one of the best contested catches receivers in the league. How does that work? I don't know. And then you have TJ Hawkinson, you have Aaron Jones. The way that this scheme is designed is just to put these guys in the right position to make the big play. And that sounds very, very basic, but it's so hard to do when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson that everyone, I mean, I'm telling you, every defensive coordinator just goes, just don't let 18 beat us. Just don't let 18 beat us. And yet, Justin Jefferson will still beat you. And it's because of Kevin O'Connell. So I really think that he has such a strong case for Coach of the Year with what he's done with Sam Darnold, but even more so the fact that this Vikings team is not a fraudulent team.
No.
They're an incredibly good, solid team across the board. The hiring of Brian Flores, all of that kind of stuff. Just chef's kiss.
Point differential, I believe, of plus 90.
I believe
plus
it's
99.
the second best in the league.
Plus 99. I don't think it's second. No, it's
at one point it was.
It's top 3 or 4. Like
yeah.
This is not the 2022 Vikings. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. This is a real deal team, and it's still out there in front of them. Like the numbers say, only like a 12% chance to win the division, only a 9% chance to earn the bye. I don't necessarily think I buy that because they still get a game against Detroit.
Yes,
Detroit has a couple big time games still looming aside from the Vikings,
and they're hurt.
I'm not writing this off just yet. Like the number 1 seed is out there for the Minnesota Vikings. And again, if that happens, it's all on the table. Such an impressive job by Kevin O'Connell. And this is beside the point, but the highest compliment I can give the guy is I was terrified of JJ McCarthy. Didn't throw much in college, never had to play from behind, young guy, terrified. Now I'm just like, oh, he'll be good. Kevin O'Connell's his coach. He'll be great.
That's why I was so excited that JJ McCarthy went to Minnesota. I was so excited.
I needed to see it again. I know that's not fair because he did a great job with Josh Dobbs and those guys last year. I needed to see it one more time. And the Sam Darnold Renaissance arc has
Kevin O'Connell school for players who can't QB good.
Exactly.
And do other things. Because Sam Darnold's going to be released into the wild probably after this year for another team to pick him up, all fully rehabilitated.
We gotta speed up if we're not.
I know.
Because Kevin O'Connell, he's only tied for the second best odds
with
another guy who needs to win this damn award, Mike Tomlin.
Yeah,
plus 400 to win Coach of the Year, searching for this award for a lot longer than most. It is wild that a man with 18 straight 500 or better seasons, 11 trips to the playoffs, soon to be 12th. The Steelers haven't locked up a playoff spot, but it's like 99.2% likely to happen. Soon to be a 12th trip to the playoffs and a Super Bowl ring and another Super Bowl appearance on top of that. Has never won this award. I don't get it. I know
never having a losing season.
This is not a lifetime achievement award. It is supposed to go to the guy that does the best job this year. But if we're going to make an exception and let that color our decision-making process, this does feel like an injustice that could be rectified.
I mean, even if it's not, this year can stand alone as having one of the best, if not the best case for Coach of the Year, given that, like, I was one of these people where I'm like, you have two quarterbacks, you have none. Sorry, this is not going to go well in Pittsburgh. When you have Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, what's going to happen? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, then Russell Wilson is hurt. Justin Fields starts the season. And then you lean on your defense like you have the last however many years it's been since Ben Roethlisberger. And the Pittsburgh Steelers stay afloat. And then you install Russell Wilson. I feel like a lot of people thought, oh, keep Justin Fields in. He gives you like the running component to his game. Is this really
right
smart?
Here? Me.
You were one of them that said, why would you pull him in favor of a guy that we haven't seen play good football in 3 years? Well, this is why. Because now Russ is killing it. The whole like, let Russ cook movement has come back. The Steelers offense for the first time again since Ben Roethlisberger is fun. They push the ball down the field. Russ is taking advantage of having guys like George Pickens down the field. Even Mike Williams is getting involved in this, and he was left for dead by the Chargers. It's an incredible feat to do all that. And again, Mike Tomlin's a defensive guy, but getting Arthur Smith to come be OC, he's a great offensive coordinator, no matter what you think of him as a head coach. And to keep up your standard of play, getting the play that he's getting out of 35-year-old Cam Hayward. Is he 35?
Man, Cam Hayward's like 100 by NFL age standards.
I know. And he's a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. Like
he's 35, soon to be 36.
36. Okay, so we're exactly the same age. God. And I'm like, I'm complaining about a different ailment every day. But he's got Cam Hayward playing at a Defensive Player of the Year level. I can't say enough about this. And then, also, it comes out after the fact. But I think it's relevant to say even now because you can see it kind of with George Pickens. There are some, shall we say, personalities that have been on this team.
It's a Steelers thing.
It's a Steelers thing.
And it's a Mike Tomlin thing to keep it under wraps.
To keep it under wraps. You look at guys that have gone from the Steelers, they go nuts. They are absolutely just the most like distractive,
Can we talk about Kimberly Martin's TikTok from like a week or two ago? Kimberly Martin of ESPN?
Yes.
Where Mike Tomlin was mic'd up by NFL Films the way that they do for lots of coaches and players around the league. And the minute they got done beating Cincinnati, he finds the NFL, such a pro. Like Mike Tomlin, he knows where they're going to be. He knows the layout of the tunnel in like every stadium because he's been doing this forever. He finds the NFL Films crew and he's just like, get this shit off me.
Yes.
Because I'm about to go into the locker room and talk some real talk. And I don't need that stuff
right now
being on mic. I don't need that being on film. One of his linemen
comes up to him and was like, oh, you were mic'd up. And he's like, shut up.
Shut up and get in the locker room.
Get in the locker room.
Awesome. Love this guy. I think the best thing going for Mike Tomlin, on top of a million other things, but there is a very real flashpoint. Like you said, there is a very real decision that Mike Tomlin made. And I can throw it back to another conversation we had with Jay Glazer this year. Jay reported after the decision to move forward with Russ, Mike Tomlin went it alone. Like it wasn't just idiots like me who were afraid to switch quarterbacks. People in the Steelers organization were like, do we want to mess up a good thing?
Right.
We're 4-2 with Justin Fields. We just beat the brakes off Las Vegas. Do we want to switch? And Mike Tomlin was like, hell yeah, we do. Because there's a higher ceiling we can reach here. And the numbers say it all. The Steelers were averaging 21 points per game and 300 yards of offense every week with Justin Fields. With Russell Wilson, it's 28 points per game and 364 yards. They're a touchdown better.
Yeah.
In a league where every other game is decided by 6 points or less, they are a touchdown better thanks to the decision that Mike Tomlin made by himself.
Solo, like completely on his own.
It's incredible. This is the Steelers' highest ceiling, I think, since probably 2017.
It's getting you fired up. I think you cursed like 3 different times in this segment.
It's awesome. I love it when people do brave shit to make themselves better. Yeah, I'll do it one more time. I love when people do stuff like this. It's so cool. He had that faith, and Russell Wilson is redeeming it. And the Steelers, like, for 5 years at this point, it's just like, all right, the Steelers are going to go 9-8, and who are they going to lose to by 3 scores in the playoffs? Like, let's just get this over with. I don't know where the Steelers are going from here, but I'm taking them seriously as a team that can
actually make a playoff run.
They can win playoff games with an S, and that hasn't been true for 5 or 6 years. Yeah. So if Mike Tomlin wins it this year, it'll be well deserved. And yet, he is still not the favorite. That would be Dan Campbell. The very obvious front
really
runner.
Fired up.
Who doesn't he get fired up? Honestly, no disrespect to him. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on Dan.
I know, because he's the favorite for
it's
so many people.
It's the most remarkable turnaround story maybe in NFL history. Like, we've rehashed it so many times. 3-13-1 to 9-8 with no playoffs to 12-5, narrow NFC title game loss. You know how hard it is to improve on 12-5 and a loss in the NFC title game? And obviously, we don't know now if the Lions will improve on their playoff performance, but they're doing their damnedest. 12-1. They are 1 win away from the best win total in their franchise's history. They've never won more than 12. They've still got another month to improve on this.
Yes, and they are playing teams that they've already beaten. Because they are playing, they have a couple more division games left. 32.1 points per game this season, though. That's really hard to keep up with. That leads the league, in case you were curious. But in the ways that you talked about Nick Sirianni being the CEO head coach and really only being able to claim who he's hired, Dan Campbell, you could say that about him because his first offensive coordinator doesn't work out. Ben Johnson is already on his coaching staff. He elevates him from tight ends coach to offensive coordinator. Look what happens. That type of identification, it's not just plucking someone that already has a track record in the way that Sirianni did. It's taking a chance on your guy because you believe in him and you've seen him. Ben Johnson is Dan Campbell's guy. It's why Ben Johnson decided to not jump ship last year and go, despite so much head coaching interest. It's why I'm not even convinced he's going to do it again this year, especially if the Lions don't win a Super Bowl. There's an unfinished business aspect to this, and Dan Campbell has gotten the buy-in from day one, despite the fact that his first season there, it was same old Lions again, 3-13-1. And then the next year, you improve, you get to a winning record, but it's not, you don't get to the playoffs. But what you do that I think really sold everyone on the Detroit Lions ahead of last season, you knocked the Green Bay Packers out of the playoffs purely out of spite. You went up to Lambeau. I was at that game.
Fun moment.
I asked some of their coaches like what Dan said in the locker room before that game, and I can't exactly say it on here, even though we're cursing. But basically, the message was 3 words: F shit up.
I like how you blanked one but not the other.
The F word is it's another level.
It's a hard line to cross.
It's another level. I can't say the F word on this good and wholesome show. The buy-in to go out there when you have nothing left to play for. The Lions were eliminated from playoff contention. The Packers needed to win that game to get in, and just say to your team, we're going to F their shit up. And then you go out and do it. And then you go and you have this season last year. And then you have this year where you had a target on your back. You were 1/2 away from the Super Bowl last year. You have a target on your back this year. And yet you are not only winning, but you are playing with your food. And you have these guys ready to go so much, no matter who is available in the lineup. We saw it in this last game against the Green Bay Packers. Half of the Lions' starting defense was out, and a couple more went down during the game. You didn't have your left tackle in Taylor Decker. Who goes out there but Dan Skipper, the infamous reporting eligible guy. And he gives his all in a situation that he is not used to being in. And then you see afterwards when Dan is given the locker room speech, he goes, "There you go, Skip. keep doing what you're doing over whatever you're doing over there. And Dan Skipper is leaning over a trash can, puking his guts out because he's got nothing left. That is the kind of thing that these guys, like Dan Campbell, elicits out of his players. They give him everything they have and then some because they believe in this guy so much. The entire city of Detroit believes in this guy so much. They are on the cusp of reaching the first Super Bowl in franchise history, and it could not be with a better coach or because of a better coach. I can't say enough about how fun they are on the field, how fun they are off the field. Has there ever been a more likable team, a more likable guy? I get if you're a fan of one of the division teams that, you're tired of hearing about this, but you cannot deny that this is just the best story in the NFL right now.
Can I get nerdy with it for a second?
Of course.
The Dan Campbell Detroit Lions remind me of the Lord of the Rings film trilogy.
Oh my God, I did not realize we were going that nerdy.
They remind me of the Lord of the Rings film trilogy.
Jesus.
For one specific reason. You might be familiar.
Nerd.
One of the greatest, highest grossing movie trilogies of all time. First one comes out, Fellowship of the Ring comes out in 2001. Well received, makes all this money, gets nominated. I think it got nominated for 13 Academy Awards. It won 4. Okay, that's cool. Like, shouldn't it have won Best Picture? It was up for Best Picture. Why didn't it win? Second one comes out. It's nominated for 6. It wins 2. And still, like, what was better than this? It didn't win Best Picture. Surely, eventually, they're going to get recognized for this, right? Third movie comes out. It's nominated for 11 Oscars, and it wins all of them. Every single one. They waited until the last year to give all of the awards to Return of the King. And it's kind of like a lifetime achievement award, right? Like, okay, we're giving an award for all 3 of these movies instead of on an individual basis. I think the Lions are going to win damn near everything there is to win if they can keep this going for a few more weeks, I think. And that's why, with everything we just said, Dan Campbell's 2 wins away from locking this thing up, because if the Lions get the number 1 seed and the road to the Super Bowl goes through Detroit, Michigan, who would have ever dreamed that that was a reality at any point in the Super Bowl era? And this entire rebuild, this entire era, starting with that kneecap press conference and wrapping up in January of 2025, he's going to win Coach of the Year. They're going to have the number 1 seed in the playoff. God knows how many All-Pros they're going to have. They're going to stockpile awards, and it's all going to reflect just how successful this era has been. Thank you. I am also very proud of myself for linking the Lions and the Lord of the Rings. I'm done.
I've got my own little quip for you. It's no longer Detroit versus everybody. It's Detroit with everybody, because everybody is behind this Lions team, and it's because of Dan Campbell.
It's truly impressive. And even with this very robust group of coaches that we just walked through, I think it's Dan Campbell's to lose as long as they don't completely fall off here over the last month. I know for a fact Dan Campbell doesn't care about that at all. The Lions have much loftier ambitions than a Coach of the Year award, but it would be a very fitting award to give to Dan for what they've done there. But the point of this was to illustrate just how deserving so many guys are of winning Coach of the Year. And I think we did it.
Yeah.
I think it's a 50-something minute segment about just how many good coaching jobs there have been in the NFL this year. I can't wait to see. There's still a month of games to play. I cannot wait to see who finishes strongly, who fades, because somebody will. It'll be fun to watch, but just wanted to illustrate just how much good coaching has been happening in the NFL this year. Carmen, I appreciate the assist.
Of course.
Doesn't feel like a week we need to spend a lot of time on the Monday night recap. Cincinnati Bengals beat the Dallas Cowboys 27-20 in an entertaining game in the way that watching people play Dizzy Bet is entertaining. You know, the calamity of it all was a lot of fun, but two teams that saw their seasons going a lot differently than this. Slug it out on Monday Night Football. We should revisit the way it ended. Just a comedy of errors befitting of how weird and bad this game was. It looked like the Cowboys, they were 5-point underdogs in their own building, looked like they were going to steal one from Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase when they blocked Ryan Rico's punt at the 2-minute warning. It looked like they were about to set themselves up in Bengal territory with not a lot of time to play, but not truly a blocked punt. It traveled past the line of scrimmage. And guess what, kids? That's a live ball. You would expect a professional football team to know that. The Cowboys don't. They handle it past the line of scrimmage. They fumble it. They give it back over to the Bengals. If it crosses the line of scrimmage, it's just as live as if it hadn't been blocked. The crazy thing is I've seen this happen to the Dallas Cowboys twice in the last few years. I'm not even talking about the Leon Lett debacle from 30 plus years ago. In 2021, this happened to the Cowboys under the guidance of special teams coordinator John Fossil. Same special teams unit, same coaching staff. It's a live ball if it goes past the line of scrimmage, guys. Bengals get it back. Joe finds Jamar Chase for the go-ahead touchdown, and that's all she wrote. Not a game I'm particularly in a hurry to ever think about again, but very funny considering the circumstances. I would like to point out, we don't need to talk about the game, but the Bengals just continue to illustrate how embarrassing this season is for them. Jamar Chase with 2 touchdowns, huge night for him. What did he finish with? 14 for 177 and 2. Yeah, that kind of year. 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns on the year. No receiver is within 6 touchdowns of him. His old college buddy, Justin Jefferson, is the only receiver in the league within 350 yards of him. I'll never understand what the Bengals were thinking by not just getting out in front of this contract. It's going to be absolutely massive. Joe Burrow with another 369-yard day. He remains the only quarterback with more than 30 passing touchdowns. He's 250 yards out in front of Geno Smith. Just video game stuff, and it's going to waste on a 5-8 team. Oh, and for good measure, Trey Hendrickson got a sack to clinch this thing at the end. He's now a sack and a half up on everybody else. 12 and a half sacks, leads the league. He wants a new deal. He's talked about it before. Forget the rest of this season for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm eager to see how an organization that is famous for being stingy is going to get contracts for Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson that make them both happy. And if they don't, how do they expect Joe Burrow to stay happy with the state of things with the way this season has gone? A disappointing season for the Cincinnati Bengals, who climb up to 5-8. It's really all I have to say about Monday Night Football. As always, let's wrap things up with a look at the power rankings now that all of the Week 14 games have been played. Let's get a look at the landscape of the league, see how everything stacks up. If you could be so kind as to show me our wing here with all our beautiful teams. Yeah, that's what it looks like. That's what it's all situated. Let's get into it. It's been a long show already. We'll wrap this up as quickly as we can. And I'm going to take an opportunity to talk about a team I wasn't sure we would really say a lot about the rest of the way. Las Vegas Raiders. Bad season, bad team. Aidan O'Connell gets hurt against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not sure what else there is to really say. They've been circling the last few spots in the power rankings for a while now. But I'm the type of sicko that can find a reason to get excited about anything. And I'm telling you, I'm a lot more interested in Monday Night Football next week with the news coming out of Las Vegas, which is that Desmond Ridder is in line to start. And who do the Raiders play on Monday Night Football in Week 15, you ask me? The Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, I'll sign up for that. I will watch that. I'll watch Desmond Ridder try to beat the team that drafted him and gave up on him. That sounds entertaining to me. One last reason to be interested in the Las Vegas Raiders if Ridder does get the start. Let's jump it up to the middle of the pack. I'm going to talk about 2 teams in tandem here. I moved the San Francisco 49ers up 3 spots to number 18. They break their losing streak. They look as good as they had in weeks. Honestly, with all the turmoil surrounding that team, and I know the Chicago Bears aren't very good, they were still incredibly impressive. Brock Purdy was fantastic. The running game got going, even with all the injuries they had there. And it's just in time to play one of the other hot teams coming out of Week 14. That would be the LA Rams, up 4 spots all the way to number 13. How could they not take a big jump after that game against Buffalo? Matthew Stafford is one of the most fun players in the league to watch when he's playing like that. Puka Nacua not far behind him. Such a fun team, and it sets up perfectly, guys. The Rams playoff odds all of a sudden looking very healthy, depending on where you look. As good as a 40% chance that the Rams can still sneak into the postseason after everything they've been through. But now they got to go play the 49ers in the return game of that matchup. They haven't played, I think it was week 2, all the way back in September when the Rams stole a game from San Francisco here in LA. Now we get the return game in the Bay. It's fantastic. As recently as a week or two ago, this felt like a nothing burger to me. Both teams seemed like they were trending in the wrong direction. The juice is back. The juice is back for one of the most underrated rivalries, I think, in the NFL. I cannot wait for Thursday Night Football. Well, let's just visit another NFC West team. I moved the Seattle Seahawks firmly up into the top 10. They're at number 9 after a dominant win against Arizona. And I'm trying this take on for size. I don't know how much I believe it, but the defense has been good all of a sudden. Jackson Smith and Jigba looking like a superstar. We know what Geno Smith is, and now the running game's coming together. I said it on the recap show. It's like Thanos adding Infinity Stones. Are the Seahawks less of a frisky team and more of a real contender? I'm not ready to definitively say, but I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking maybe the Seahawks are a lot better than people are giving them credit for. Let's wrap it up. Weird week to move the Eagles into the number 2 spot, but the Bills lost. It was shaky against Carolina, but the Eagles get the win. I've got my eye on them because the offense could have been a heck of a lot better, but 11-2 is 11-2. The number 1 seed in the NFC is still up for grabs. Yeah, it's, not the most emphatic performance of this run that the Eagles have been on, but all you got to do is win your games, and the Eagles have. That does it for the power rankings. That does it for the show. As always, we will be back on Thursday to preview a fantastic Week 15. If last weekend felt a little slow, I forgive you for feeling that way, but Rams Niners on Thursday. We got Colts Broncos, which is basically a wild card elimination game. Bills Lions, Steelers Eagles, Buccaneers Chargers. The nightcap is Packers Seahawks. Yeah, we're loaded for Week 15. We got a lot to look forward to. I can't wait to break it down for y'all. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your pods so it's ready for you on Thursday morning. All of the Week 15 action coming your way. We will talk to you then. As always, I appreciate it so much.